Hi, I'm Yolanda and this is Speak On. Today I am joined by musician Frank Turner. Thank you so much for joining me. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I mean, obviously, I'm as well as a musician can be in 2020. Let's qualify it like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's could be worse.
Yeah. Okay, so you've just released Bad Times, Good Vibes from your
Yes.
upcoming album with John Snodgrass, Buddies 2. Can you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that song, what we can expect from the album? And oh my gosh, that little Tyler's voice on it is just too
Yeah.
cute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so 10 years ago, John and I met on tour in the USA. He's a country singer from Colorado, and we got on really well. And in fact, well, the full story is during that tour, we played a show in Little Rock, Arkansas to essentially no one.
Yeah.
I mean, there was about 10 people at the gig, and we actually had a wonderful night. It was really fun because everybody was just sort of got over themselves and the whole kind of ego of like being a rock star or whatever, which is not a thing that I consider myself to be. But anyway,
Yeah.
and we had a lovely time. And then a couple of days later, John and I wrote a song about that gig called Big Rock and Little Rock that took us about 15 minutes to write. This then turned into, we wrote a whole album in one day. I went to Colorado.
Wow.
And then we recorded it the following day, and there was a fair amount of whiskey involved. And given the sort of self-imposed time restraints, some of it's great and some of it's not great, but it was fun. And then so that was 10 years ago, and during lockdown, during the particularly the depths of lockdown when you like couldn't leave the house kind of thing. We were looking for things to do, and we talked about the fact that it was 10 years, so we said, let's do it again. So this record we wrote in one day. We then spent a lot more time recording it, and I've been learning how to properly produce and engineer and mix records during lockdown, so I've done that for this. And we've got our friend Stefan from The Descendants is playing on the record, and various other people. So Bad Times, Good Vibes, so we probably wrote this song in about 15-20 minutes, probably, thereabouts. And this was each song, it's kind of one person kind of takes the lead, and this is one of John's ones. He sort of had the kind of chorus riff, should we say, and I threw the verse in, and it's kind of a lockdown song, I suppose. And I'm not going to stand here and say it's the most profound set of lyrics that either of us have ever written in our lives, because it was written in like 20 minutes, but it's a fun song. And our buddy Todd Bean from the band Glossary plays pedal steel on the song as well. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it sounded, and things. I think that's the main thing that came across, is that it sounded fun. And I didn't know what to expect. I switched it on, and then I loved that. Then you just started talking to each other. I was like, this is awesome.
Oh yeah, well, so
I loved that.
The original record, we kind of, as I said, we sort of pretty much recorded it in one sitting the following day with hangovers, which then became more drunk. We were young then, and the sort of the chat is quite a feature of the first record. So we added some chat for this record as well. So there's a fair amount of us just talking absolute nonsense at each other.
Yeah, talking about how you can tell how old a dog is.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, which is a valid question.
Yeah, exactly. Really, I'm not going to lie, that question surprised me. But yeah.
Well, John's a very eccentric dude, and I mean that in the best way possible. And he was just kind of like, I was thinking, how do you tell how old a dog is? And the song kind of came out of that.
I love it because it's kind of, I think, that interaction you genuinely have with your friend, where you can just do something, then all of a sudden it'll be like, but why is this like that? It's like shower thoughts, but you can have shower thoughts with your mates.
I think that's a good way of putting it. John is like shower thoughts made into human form. Like
and it's exactly the kind of things that I talk to my friends about. Sometimes we just ring each other and just be like, just ask something incredibly random and weird, but it's fine. We get each other, and that's cool.
Well, there you go. And then we've just turned that into songs.
I love it. And what can we expect from the other songs that are going to be on there?
So, I mean, much as with the first record, some of the songs are more quote unquote serious, or at least kind of they're kind of actual songs that have kind of more kind of structure and all the rest of it. And then some of them are on the sillier side. I think probably the silliest song on the record is there's a famous song by Kiss called Beth. And John suggested that we do a version of it and call it Macbeth. And change it so that instead of being a love song, it was a song about the play by Shakespeare. And it's about 30 seconds long, and it's really, really silly.
It.
So, but it's lots of fun, and there's definitely some tunes in there which are I'm really proud of, that I think are really great songs. But there's some that are just fun as well.
Yeah. Which is perfect, I suppose, also what you kind of want in lockdown as well, to be able to just have these things that can help you have fun, because we were all trapped inside.
It definitely, there was a fair amount of kind of release in doing the projects at all. It was, as I say, we sort of initially came up with the idea of doing it again partly because of the anniversary and partly because it was just like, what are we going to do with our days? Do you know what I mean? We're just kind of completely empty diaries, which is something I'm very much not used to. So it was a good way of passing time.
Oh, brilliant. So in your music, like, you're an open book. You talk really openly about your feelings and mental health in your music, and have been for a while. This is not new to you. And obviously the songs Don't Worry, Recovery, Be More Kind. Like, what is your process? What comes first, like the thoughts on paper, or does it come out as like fully formed lyrics?
I wish it came out as fully formed lyrics. That'd save me a lot of time. I mean, I feel like most songs for me start as a feeling. I don't really have like a process as in, lyrics first, then music, or music first, then lyrics. Sometimes it's one, sometimes it's the other. But this is going to sound vague because it is vague. But like on some levels, it's like songwriting is just kind of like, I get this kind of itch in my brain about what if there was a song that made me feel like this, or indeed I have this feeling, and what if it would be like if it was a song, however you want to look at it. And sometimes that can be quick, and with obviously the songs with John, they're by design, they're quick. And for myself, like Don't Worry was a song I wrote very quickly. But then by contrast, I have songs that have taken years and years to get right. And that's not like years and years of slaving on them every single day. But it's just kind of like you go back to an idea and you sort of sniff around it and see if you've kind of found a breakthrough, and then you go, no, not ready, kind of thing. And, actually this morning I had a bit of a breakthrough with an idea that I've been playing with all year. So far, and I'm not saying I finished it, but I definitely got I got another 4 lines out of myself. So hooray!
Been productive. Yeah. That's wicked. Okay, so then has the industry changed at all over the past few years in regards to kind of mental health, people talking about it, how people are treated, how people look after themselves, and the environment? Sorry, it's a big question.
Oh, no, it's totally fine. Yes is the short answer, and a good thing that is too. I think, I've been a professional musician for more than 2 decades now, and if I think back to when I started out, the idea that I would talk about my mental health in an interview would just be laughable. It would have been extremely weird thing to do, and probably not a brilliant idea, and all this kind of thing. And that's completely changed now, and mental health has become a major topic in the music industry, and I think that's a good thing. And one of the reasons I think it's a good thing, other than to do with, there's issues to do with the mental health of musicians and people in the music industry, which we can talk about in a minute. But the other thing for me is that this is going to be a medium length point, but it's going somewhere, I promise. Like I generally kind of try and err on the side of caution when it comes to the impact of what I do for a living. I'm not a nurse or a teacher. Do you know what I mean? And like, if I stop doing what I do, then the world will continue turning, and it's not that important. And I guess part of the reason for that is there are a lot of musicians who wander around convinced of their own importance in a way that seems kind of lame to me. But having said all that, like I saw Stephen Fry actually give a talk a few years ago where he talked about arts leading the conversation, and he talked about, obviously from a very personal experience, he talked about how, for example, gay rights and LGBTQ rights, a lot of that kind of normalization of that conversation was led by people in music and theatre and film and all that kind of thing. And when it was, when people like Elton John and Freddie Mercury came out as gay, that was huge, because it sort of, it normalized the conversation and brought it out of the shadows and brought it into the mainstream. And on that level, one of the things that artists with a capital A can do is change the conversation or lead the conversation in certain directions. And that really kind of affected me, because it made me kind of be less cynical about the value of what I talk about and all the rest of it. I still don't think I'm changing the world doing what I do, but like if by being part of a broader movement towards a more comfortable conversation about mental health, I can be part of moving that out of the shadows and into the mainstream. That seems like a cool thing to do, and I do think that's happened in the last in my time in the music industry. Definitely, I spend a lot of time talking about it now, and that's really cool.
And it makes perfect sense that artists would talk about it, because if we think about our mental health and our emotions and how tied up to art that is, and if songs are not only era defining, we can connect through music. It reflects how we feel, and when these things are written, they're written based on an emotion mainly that somebody has felt or something they've witnessed. So it's amazing now that it's not just the music talking, it is the artist behind it talking as well. I think it makes so much difference.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, there's a weird, I always want to be slightly careful about what I'm about to say, but there is a thing that people who write songs quite often tend to be people who have a slightly kind of fractured view of the world or approach to the world, and that's the thing that enables them to write in a way that's meaningful. And that's not always true, and I want to share. I don't want to get into the whole kind of like you've got to be damaged to write well, because I don't think that's true.
No.
But like I always think back to one of my favorite writers is Leonard Cohen, and there's a famous line: "There's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in." And a lot of my favorite writers, whether you're talking about Scott from Frightened Rabbit, who's a dear friend of mine, or indeed Nina Simone, or Adam Duritz and Cat and Crows. These are people who had kind of issues with their mental health and were able to kind of weaponize that, utilize that in a way that was positive, to create great art. And then lots of other people, because of course it's not only artists who have issues with their mental health, good lord, can see that and kind of find something in it, and that's the connection that gets made.
Yeah, and the what you were saying there about being mindful about saying that, I'll be honest, I'd never thought about it being the fact that artists have anything happening which is all fragmented, which is why they write. I just think they're just lucky to be able to express themselves.
And of course that's the actual root of the matter, is that
they're just so lucky.
Totally. I mean, some people have, and I'm studiously not trying to talk about myself here, but some people have that kind of skill of turning emotion into something, whether it's a play or a painting or a piece of music or whatever it might be. But lots of people have lots of skills, and indeed lots of artists lack plenty of other skills. Again, let me tell you.
I think it's such an important conversation to have. And I know you're saying, you're not changing anything, but I think every time anybody does speak about these things, they are changing something. Because in like when I was preparing for speaking to you today, and I started speaking to a few of my friends, and I say that who comes to mind when you think of music, talking about mental health being open, and it's like you were mentioned as well as a few other people as well. And then because people really admired that you were open about it, that you had the courage to speak about it, and truly there are people that you're really, really inspiring to be more open in their lives, which is amazing.
A lovely thing to hear. I will say that, I mean, it's important to state that one of the things I figured out a few years ago is that I actually find there's self-interest in this as well, in the sense that I kind of, at the beginning, particularly when I started going through a process of therapy myself, I was very reluctant to talk about it to anybody. I was reluctant to do it in the first place. I was raised in a family where you don't do that kind of thing. And then I got into hardcore punk where you don't talk about your feelings. Yeah. So the idea of kind of going to therapy was like, no. And then it was a thing I had to do. And then I didn't want to tell anybody about it ever. And then I sort of had this kind of breakthrough of realizing that if I talk about it, I actually feel better in myself, and so I benefit from this as much as anybody else, and I've definitely found this kind of rhythm of being in talking about it in a public way. It helps me as well.
And are musicians talking to each other more about mental health, like behind closed doors, and supporting each other?
Yeah, I think they are, and it's a funny old thing, because the music industry is a place that's not particularly well designed for people who can be, I don't know if this is the right word to use, but sort of fragile, mentally fragile.
Yeah, more vulnerable people.
Yeah, there you go, vulnerable, that's a better word.
Yeah.
The rigours of what you have to do to be a successful musician in terms of press schedule and touring and all that kind of thing. And indeed, at root, I think one of the craziest parts of what I do for a living is that, and I can't put my finger on it, I'm not sure there's anything necessarily wrong with this structurally, but it's essentially you're a creative person, you pour your life and soul into your art, and then you put it out for judgment to the world. And it's just why are you doing this? As I say to myself pretty regularly, and it's particularly there's something, as a musician, it's funny, you can spend a year and a half working on an album and it's 40 minutes of music, and then people spend 40 minutes with it and go, yeah, it's all right. And you kind of go, but that's my life. And like I say, this is just how it is. But there's definitely, in terms of thinking about touring, for example, I've been on tour for more than 2 decades, and in that period of time, alcohol is everywhere. I arrive at a room where there's alcohol. Generally, more often than not, there's alcohol and no food. And if I drink all the alcohol, someone will get me more. Do you know what I mean? And and if you're interested in things stronger than alcohol, which I was for a long time, they're pretty easy to find as well. And so there's all these kind of pressures and all of these temptations sort of bundled into one place. I do think one of the things I try and do, because I'm 38 now, and that puts me in the kind of elder age bracket within the kind of rock and roll world, shall we say. And I think back to the fact that when I started out, there were just no adults anywhere. I didn't know anybody who was more than about 5 years older than me. And we were all just kind of kids. We treated it like an endless stag do for a time. Do you know what I mean? It's like, get drunk. And it's disastrous. And it burned people out. And, people really suffered from it. And one of the things I try and do these days is if I make friends with people in a younger band, an upcoming band, successful band, whatever it might be, is I don't want to sound like a old man shaking my walking stick here, but I just kind of say to people, it's okay to just go to bed some nights. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Finish the show, you're tired, go to bed. There'll be another after show party tomorrow night, and you can do that. And it's okay to take time out of your day to go and find somewhere that's selling healthy food. And not just live off KFC for the rest of your life or whatever. So I do try and sort of spread that message that it's okay to take a bit better care of yourself.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point. It's really important. I work in PR, so very much understand the whole, you walk into a room and then here's all the alcohol and there's like one canapé. And then, you're walking around with a glass and people are just filling it endlessly as well. And there is just endless amounts of events and things to go to. And for me, it's just, I'm just going on the sidelines as a PR. I'm not having to promote myself. So I can't imagine having to keep up that energy and what that does to you.
Yeah, and indeed, there's always that initial temptation that a couple of drinks is going to loosen you up and make you more kind of comfortable in your skin, which it does for lots of people, including me. But the problem is that moderation is hard, it turns out, particularly when you're young. And I did a terrible job of that for years.
Yeah, I mean, so many of us did, didn't we? Yeah, and also when people are just endlessly filling up your glass, it's also really hard to keep track of how much you've drunk as well.
Absolutely.
That is a genuine thing. I was talking to my family about that, and I was like, it's a genuine thing that's really difficult. You have to almost like physically make sure you just finish it and put the glass down and just wander away from it because someone will do it while you're not even paying attention.
Yeah, totally.
So kind of talking again about like how mental health of musicians can be affected, how things like streaming has an effect, because how has that changed everything? Because obviously it's less money coming through, it's just a different world. Has that had an effect on anyone?
I mean, I think the thing about that is that so the whole impact of the internet on the business structure of the music industry started being felt at just about the time I started signing record deals. So I wasn't ever particularly personally familiar with the world where you just kind of sold records and made loads of money out of that, and that was that. That was slightly before my time. So in some levels, I'm just kind of used to it, the entire music industry being like a sort of a panicked, burning, screaming building, which just sort of feels like it's been. And there is an important point to be made, which is that the term music business has two halves to it, and I care about the music an awful lot more than I care about the business. I want to make sure that I look after my own and that the people I work with get paid and all blah 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 blah. But like I'm much 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 more concerned with the music than I am with the business side. And there was a business model from roughly mid 1950s through till about 1999 2000 that then broke because of new technology. Taking the broad view, I don't care very much. Do you know what I mean? And like streaming's been weird. I think we're still ironing out some of the creases in that business model, but it's not. It's not like massively unjust, in my opinion. Do you know what I mean? So some people think that it's an absolute travesty that streaming's a thing, and I'm not. I think that that's because they're sort of wedded to this pre-existing idea about how money should flow in the music industry, and it's kind of like if you actually examine why you think that's the case, it's like, well, because it used to be like that. That's a terrible reason to think that something should stay the same forever. Yeah, of course, as we can all agree. So and fine, we live in a world now in which I make my living touring and selling T-shirts, to be honest, and that's fine. So it's changed, and obviously negotiating change can be disconcerting, should we say, and perhaps it puts more pressure on artists to tour more. But the thing is, I've always loved touring more than anything in the whole world. So that was, and I was always going to tour as hard as I do anyway, because I love it. So that wasn't like a massive bummer for me. Do you know what I mean? It was like, oh no, I have to do what I was going to do anyway. I suspect that I do sometimes think about stuff like, if you think about artists like Nick Drake, for example, who hated playing shows and it really made him uncomfortable, but made beautiful music. I sort of wonder how someone like that would survive in the world that we live in now. Yeah. Who knows? I don't have to. I'm fortunate to not have to answer that question personally, but I suspect that for some people who are, I'm not going to name names. I know people in very successful bands who really really dislike the business of touring and have found it quite difficult because you sort of have to make a living, and that can be it's not very artistic. Do you know what I mean? It's just like I've been forced into doing this thing that you hate, where what you really want to do is be in a studio making beautiful music.
Yeah, of course. I suppose, like you said, there are so many different parts to it, and there is like a pressure as well to have to go and perform when you just want to go behind the scenes and make the music. And if people have social anxiety, etc., it must be really scary.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I'm as I say, I'm fortunate enough that I don't. The one place in the world that I don't feel anxious is on stage. Weirdly enough, it's that you put me on stage and I'm okay. Everywhere else, like, but stage, thumbs up.
Perfect. Okay. So in within kind of music, are there any other pressures you feel on any other parts, considering you're so comfortable on stage? Is it for you, is it being in the stage, being in the studio, everything else not so much?
Yeah, I mean, even the studio can get quite sort of stressful for me. There's one of the things I like about performing on a stage is that it's like you do your best that night, and if it doesn't go well, you do it again tomorrow. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And even if it does go well, you try and better it tomorrow or whatever. Whereas there's something so permanent about a studio, you kind of play a part and you kind of go, oh my God, that might be how it sounds to everyone forever, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think the other major pressure in life, and I'm about to go on a minor rant here, so
it's all right, go for
brace yourself.
I enjoy a minor rant.
I think that social media as it currently stands is largely utterly poisonous, and particularly for people, musicians, and people who sort of come into the public eye. The tone of discussion, particularly on Twitter, but in other places as well, is just so vile, and it's become this sort of hatred competition, and I think it says terrible things about us as a species, and I think it's an impending disaster, an ongoing disaster for our politics. I mean, good Lord. But there are so many people who seem to spend their days looking for ways and means to tear down strangers. And I think it's really sad, and I think it's really terrifying, and I've had some horrible experiences with it. And on some levels, I will hold my hands up and say, I said some stupid stuff in my time. And, you should take responsibility for that and own it. And I try to do that. But at the same time, it's like there are people out there who just spend their waking days trying to find reasons that I'm the devil or whatever. And it's horrible. It's really horrible. And it's disastrous for my mental health. And one of the major things I've done in recent years, with the encouragement of both my therapist and my wife, is kind of delete Twitter from my phone and stop reading comments every day and all the rest of it. And of course it's tempting to do, and everybody who's a performer is in some ways kind of a broken egomaniac looking for reassurance and validation. I mean, this is just true, but it is I don't think a lot of people realise how much impact they can have on someone they've never met and never will meet by just kind of going, oh, you're an arsehole and this is shit. And it's like, because it's part of the human psyche that you can scroll past 99 people telling you you're a genius and then spend 2 weeks thinking about the one person who told you you're an arsehole. And it's
of course.
Just the whole thing stinks to me. It's really, really, really dangerous and really bad. And it's certainly like, I don't want to say it's ruined my life. That's a huge overstatement, but it's certainly like ruined many, many days for me in the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years. And really, I've had times when I couldn't sleep and I couldn't eat, and I became incredibly stressed, and like my anxiety got like off the scale and all the rest of it. And I've had days when I've been scared to play shows because I'm worried about what people have been saying and will that come into the real thing. And I'm scared to meet people after a show, which I really, really resent, because hanging out with people after shows, again, is something that I feel that I really enjoy. And the whole thing has been really, really awful. So I think that's a new thing. And it's not just musicians, obviously. I think it's anybody in any kind of public eye. And one of the things that I want to say, and indeed that quite a lot of labels have started saying to kind of young new musicians, is like, be insanely careful about what you say in a public sphere, because there are millions of people out there who are just trying to find the worst interpretation of it possible.
Absolutely.
And that what a horrible way to live. Yeah. What an awful thing for us as a species,
It's really kind of, I'd say it's not even a double-edged sword, because it's so much more one way than the other, I think, at times.
Right.
Because on one hand, what I like about social media, and I have a company that looks after influencers, I have a company that looks after influencers, but what I do at my agency is I have a psychologist on retainer to look after my clients. Because I was like, this is not a safe space for you to be mentally. So they have someone they can speak to all the time.
That's really interesting and really cool, I think. And like, that's not something that's ever been afforded or offered to me. I mean, I have gone to.
It should be standard at all agencies, as far as I'm concerned.
I think you're right, and I think that's a really interesting and really cool idea. But yeah, it is like it's. and it's funny because I can sort of remember when Twitter wasn't quite this poisonous.
Yeah.
And it was kind of, oh, cool, I can communicate with everybody. How lovely. And now it's just this snake pit. And I use it as a broadcast tool, and it's useful for that. But I do my level best to remember that it's not real life and that I don't need to spend any time on it if I can avoid it. It's just, and I think that's a huge thing for younger artists. You know, you can just suddenly get absolutely slaughtered, and it's a conversation that's just so detached from reality to me. Like the whole thing, everyone's shouting at idols at the moment. Like of all bands, idols. You know, a band who's gone out of their way to try and be on the right side of all the issues that we're talking about right now. Studiously at every point. Now they're the devil as well. It's just like at which there comes a point where you're like, I'm not really taking this seriously anymore. You know. But it's, you know, and none of this is to say that anyone should be above criticism. Of course, we're above criticism, but we're not talking about criticism. We're talking about like hate-fueled witch hunts, which is a different thing.
It definitely gets it. That's the thing. It's the kind of becomes mob mentality, doesn't it? After a while, and I think when I've spoken to my clients, I say, see it as you're a magazine. You're just putting stuff out there. You don't have to take back anything else. So, but there are people who are readers. There are some people that are going to be in the community who will say nice things, etc., and that's great. But on the whole, see it as a magazine where you're publishing content, and then you close the magazine, and then you walk away and you enjoy your life.
Yeah,
and
totally.
There are definitely, I think, benefits from it. I think. Because especially with press and editors and the way that used to be there, it's like a few people who are editors who are the gatekeepers for taste and everything else. So some people, music may not have been heard where if it was for somebody at a desk deciding what they thought was great or not. So it's great in one way to reach all these people and for people to find their community, but at the same time the vitriol and what that does to people's mental health. It's scary.
Completely. And I totally take what you mean and agree with it. Like the idea that kind of the gatekeeping thing is been radically decentralized is amazing because I can remember being a kid where the only way of getting music was like NME, Kerrang and Radio 1. And that meant that the people who worked for those places had enormous power over what anybody would be exposed to. And when I got into underground music, it was an enormous effort. And there are people who are sort of weirdly nostalgic for when it was hard to be in underground music. And I think that's bullshit. It's just like, it's way better that any kid anywhere can now go and listen to the most obscure band. How cool is that? You know, you don't have to be in the know and hip to know about obscure music. That's great. That can only be a good thing. But yeah, it's like, I mean, one of the ways I think about it is like, because again, I can happily remember the music business before social media was a thing, and like the offer that Twitter made in a roundabout way, which was that it was like there were always people talking about you if you're a successful musician all around the world in pubs and bars in their houses and stuff, and Twitter sort of offers you this kind of like this illusion that you can put a microphone into every single one of those conversations and listen in, and it's like, why would you want to do that? You know, and it's like, it's tempting at first, but if you think about it in those terms, it's just like, what an insane thing to want to do. Like, what? How could that be anything other than a disaster? You know, I don't need to listen to what it's. There are days when I think that Twitter's like the writing on the stalls of a toilet. You know, the walls of a stall in a toilet. It's like, I don't need to read what's written about me on the stalls of every toilet in the Western world. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I remember when I just used to go on Twitter just to go and see what happened on TV shows.
Yeah.
And that was fine for me. But yeah, I kind of, my dad loves Twitter, and he actually has, because he was saying he's very mindful about things that impact his mental health and things that impact the way he sees things. And so he has different Twitter accounts. So he has one where it's kind of news stuff, and he very rarely goes into it because he just finds it, in his words, relentlessly bleak. But then he has ones where he just follows comedians that he likes and just musicians that he likes, and that's it. Everything else is cut out, and he doesn't look at any replies. He just goes to look at that, and then constantly then just sends me videos from Twitter that he thinks are funny and things about Crocs, which are his favourite shoes. Right. So yeah.
And that's the thing. I mean, it is possible to curate your social media in a way that's kind of better thought out and all the rest of it. But I think the thing is that for a lot of kind of younger people coming onto Twitter, they don't have that skill yet. And for the younger musicians or artists of any kind coming on, they're not kind of wise to that yet. So and I mean, there is a strong argument to be made that we're going through a kind of teething process with this new form of communications technology, and that we'll figure it out. And I sincerely hope that we do, because you know, there can be cool things about it, and that's cool. But just right now I feel like it's just a world that I want to avoid.
Is it? Right, honestly, I think, you know, listen to your song, just Be Kind. Yeah. And it's just like that, just like, can we just do that? Because I feel like if people were doing that, then we'd see a little bit less of this crap on
Well,
social as
I
well.
think one of the problems with it is I feel like a lot of people kind of psychologically, humans have evolved in this way that when we talk to another person, there's an awful lot more than verbal communication going on. You're reading social cues, you're reading physical cues, whatever it might be. And all of that's stripped away when you're arguing with a hashtag. And like, you know, I've had many occasions in my life where somebody's been utterly vitriolic about me, and I kind of respond and go, oh, wow, ow, kind of thing.
Thank you.
And they kind of reply and go, oh, I didn't realise you were going to read this, or, you know, and they never quite put it this way, but the implication is, oh, I didn't realise I was talking to a real person. And it's like, but you are, of course you are. And I think that's one of the major things for me. One of the major flaws of it is that it strips away the sense that you're communicating with real people. And then people kind of adopt the whole, like, oh, well, they're famous or they're successful or they're rich or whatever it might be. It doesn't matter. And it's like, first of all, I'm not rich, and I'm medium successful and not especially famous and all the rest of it. And it hurts when people call me an arsehole all day, every day.
Okay, brilliant. So talking about being kind, what does it really mean to be kind, do you think?
Oh, there's a question. I mean, and I hesitate to try and be an authority on this, or indeed anything. But I don't know. I think it's about empathy and it's about consideration, really. It's about putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. I also think there's a strong case to be made that, like, genuine kindness is not reciprocal. It's not like I'm going to do this for somebody because then they'll do something nice for me afterwards. Yeah. You know, and if I don't believe that they will, then I won't be nice to them. Like, that's not kindness. Do you know what I mean? That's kind of calculation.
Yeah.
There's a level on which kindness is just trying to be a nice person because that's a good thing to do. And if somebody's nice to you back again, that's great. But if they're not, then life goes on. You know. I think that there's reciprocity seems kind of like, it doesn't smell right to me.
Yeah, almost like as when people film their good deeds for social media. That is
right, you know, and it's like totally, and like, I mean, I like. Well, I mean, I'm genuinely debating whether to even to say this, but like one of the things. So I do a fair amount of charity fundraising, right? As in like doing shows or raffling old guitars or whatever it might be. That's obviously a different thing from me donating money to charity myself. Yeah. I don't talk about the money that I donate to charity on social media or in public in any way because it's not what you're supposed to do. I mean, that's what my mum raised me to believe. But it's not supposed to be for effect. I try to do what I can, but I don't want to talk about it in public. That's not what we're talking about.
And other things you do about raising awareness, aren't they? So
right, or indeed weaponising the fact that there are loads of people paying attention to me. And it's like, cool, well, let's take that and then raise some money for X, Y, and Z. And that's cool, but you know, so for example, I raised about 200 grand for independent venues during the first part of lockdown. I didn't give independent venues 200 grand. I don't have 200 grand. But like, you know, I'm proud of the fact that I sort of facilitated that movement, but it was the people who donated that money. It wasn't me, you know. But yeah, so I think that kindness is not performative, should we say?
Yeah. And what about being kind to yourself? Because do you think if people were kinder to themselves, then maybe they would be nicer to others?
Yeah, definitely. I do think that there's a level on which, and that's the thing that I've kind of learned and thought about a lot in recent years, is you know, self-esteem is an important thing, and that it's quite difficult to live a kind of stable and fulfilled life if you spend half your waking hours beating up on yourself or worse. Something I've kind of found a lot over the years is that a lot of people I know who kind of struggle with their mental health tend to be quite kind and generous people externally, but they're just terribly unkind to themselves. And a fantastic piece of advice I was given that I try and share with other people is like, try and imagine that you or the actions that you've taken that you're stressing out about were done by a friend of yours, and you'd be totally forgiving about it. You'd be like, don't worry about it, it's cool, it happens to everybody, just don't stress, you know, chill out. But you never say that to yourself, but you should. You know what I mean? It's like you should be forgiving to yourself as much as you are to anybody else. Absolutely,
I completely get that. I've been speaking about mental health for the past few years just because I went through a few of my own experiences, and a lot of having therapy and learning to get through that was this thing about being just nicer to myself and not so hard on myself as well. Because then also I found that being hard on myself, I wasn't always being the best to other people or externally, just because you're just, everything is inside, just kind of swooshing around. And just by taking it a little bit easier on myself and looking at it in exactly that way, then it made all the difference to me.
Yeah, totally. I think actually that I meant a word that I mentioned just then, which I think is important, is forgiveness. I think that one of the problems with the culture on social media and that kind of thing, going back a tiny bit, is this kind of complete absence of forgiveness. It's like, you know what, people fuck up, people do stupid shit. I do stupid shit all the time. I say stupid things, I phrase them badly, or I don't think about them before I say them, or whatever it might be. And that doesn't mean that I'm then eternally the worst human being who's ever lived forever. You know, and indeed, if you treat everybody like that, then no progress on anything will get made, because the number of people who are utterly spotless and blameless is zero, just to let you in a little secret, you know what I mean? And like, we have to be forgiving to other people, we have to be forgiving to ourselves, you know, and look for ways to be constructive and to say, well, that wasn't cool, but let's talk about why it wasn't cool, and then perhaps talk about how it could be cooler in the future, and blah, blah, blah. And that's a much, much more constructive way of looking at the world, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you made a really good point there. I think that really does would have such an impact on how we react to things on social media as well.
Right.
If we could think, well, actually, there is a learning opportunity here for someone. I think it's different if people double down and they're really not learning. They've chosen their side and that's fine.
Sure. No,
but we don't need to wish them ill. We can just move on and turn our backs to it.
Right, completely. But also, I mean, to bring politics into it, forgive me, for a second, like the success in politics is about convincing people to join your team. You know what I mean? And if all you do is tell everybody, you're the devil and you can't possibly ever be on my side, it's like, well, now they're not on your side forever.
Yeah.
and therefore your aims that you're trying to advance have suffered. And it's like, it's a better idea, in my opinion, to like try and convince people of what you're arguing for and bring them over to your side than to just tell them that they're arseholes, you know, because then they will go, cool, I'm an arsehole, and ride off into the sunset. And of course there are some people who aren't persuadable and aren't convincible, and there are people who that we should actively fight. You know, we're talking about open fascism, racism, that kind of thing. Of course, yes, absolutely fine. But what we need to do is make sure they have as few followers as possible. Do you know what I mean? Like, try and stop people being persuaded by their argument. Yeah,
absolutely. And so, like, obviously, well, with some of the things that we've talked about, or you've mentioned there, it's very 2020. Everything is happening.
Yeah.
Not is happening. Everything's revealing itself to people that may have been living in the Matrix for a really long time. I, as a black person, have been out of the Matrix since I was born. So it's amazing that everyone else is seeing the glitches now. It's not just me in the corner saying stuff.
Totally. And I have learned a lot this year as a white person.
It's definitely been a mad year for everyone, hasn't it?
It has, and I think this is an interesting issue. Wow, we've got into politics now. Like, in terms of, for example, and you know, the whole Black Lives Matter thing that's happened this year. My decision on that was to put out a statement of support and then to shut the fuck up, because it's like, it's not really for me to kind of go, well, here's what I think about this endlessly all fucking day, every day, because it's not fucking about me. Do you know what I mean? It's about other people, and it's about, I want to learn. I want to know what I've been getting wrong. I want to know how I can get it right in the future. And so, and one of the ways you do that is you stop talking and you start listening. Yeah. You know, so I've tried very hard to do that this year. I mean, I try to do it anyway, generally, but like, you know, I think it's really important to have humility. Intellectual humility, I think, is a priceless thing, and to realise that, and for me, the older you get, that's the more you learn that you don't really know anything about anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And I think that if everybody could recognise that no human anywhere could possibly know everything about everything, then we would all come at things in a bit more of a sensible way.
Exactly. And obviously this year's been kind of hard on mental health, with lockdown and everything that's happening with just Donald Trump's existence in the world. It's all quite stressful. So what have you done to kind of maintain your mental health during this time? Like, how have you just stayed remotely, I don't want to say sane or chills or whatever?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think there's a couple of things. One of the things, just a brief side, I mean, I think one of the problems in the world that we currently live in is this idea of 24-hour news, because it's just simply not possibly logically true that the same number of equally important things happen every day. Yeah. It's not true. It can't be true. But of course, the news media has a kind of inbuilt need to present the world as if there's an equal amount of important stuff happening every day. And particularly in the depths of coronavirus, you had BBC News is just like live coronavirus updates, and it's just like these are not all equally important. So I've tried to ration my intake of news. I want to be aware of what's happening in the world. I want to be aware and connected and all that kind of thing, but I don't need to sit there reading the news every single day. So I tried to kind of like check the news in the morning, check the news in the evening, and then get on with my day. The other thing, the major thing for me, was routine. And when I'm on tour, there's a lot of routine. It's a funny sort of misconception that tour's this kind of wildly disorganised, chaotic bacchanalia. Tour is an incredibly regimented way of living. I get a day sheet every day. My tour manager tells me what to do and who to talk to and when to play every morning for the whole day. And that structure is actually really useful to me. And a lot of my own personal issues to do with mental health have arisen in occasions when I come back off tour and have then immediately lost that structure and have kind of gone, take all the drugs in the whole world or whatever. You know, and one of the things, you know, and I've kind of dealt with that to a degree, but like at the start of lockdown, there was definitely a couple of weeks where it was just like endless kind of pajama and Netflix and drinking wine at 3 p.m. and all the rest of it.
It was part of the process. That was definitely part of the process, wasn't it?
Right, yeah. But for me, the thing was kind of building routine into my day, and even just little things like making sure I got dressed.
Yes.
You know, there were definitely days when I didn't need to get dressed. I wasn't leaving the house or seeing anybody other than my wife. And, you know, but it was like, get up in the morning, get dressed, shave, shower, whatever it might be. And then, you know, I sort of, this room I'm in now, which is our spare room, I kind of set up some music stuff in here and sort of almost started like clocking in.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It was like, right, I'm going to go and do some work. Or work, something constructive, you know what I mean? Rather than just sitting around wallowing in how awful 2020 is. And it is awful.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I'm not trying to belittle that in any way.
Yeah.
But structure and routine are a thing that personally I require a lot in my life. And I've this year I have worked very hard to make that a thing.
Yeah, definitely. Same. I was like, okay, get up, have a shower now, like have my breakfast at this time, like work out. I had to add in different things. I had like a little whiteboard that I wrote things on just because that helped me, because the moment I fell out of routine, I mean, don't get me wrong, I felt like everyone had the 2 to 4 weeks of I just really was like, I live in tracksuits now and I watch Netflix for a living. I did that for a bit, but then as soon as I got out of that, I was like, okay, now I have to have routine and I need to find the pace that suits me going forward, because God knows when everything's normal again.
Right, totally. And it's funny, you mentioned physical exercise there as well. That's a huge part of mental health for me, is like, and actually one of my biggest luxury purchases in my life, which is just out of shot over there, is a running machine.
Amazing.
And it turns out that running machines, I mean, they're not cheap, but they're nowhere near as expensive as I thought they were going to be. And it was at the start of the year, me and my wife got one. And boy, did we feel smug about that in March. Do you know what I mean? And it was like, making sure you do some physical exercise every other day, every day, whatever works for you. My wife does a lot of yoga or is running and all the rest of it. It's really good for your mental health, and it's good for your physical health, obviously, as well. Yeah. But it's structure and it's routine.
Yeah. Okay, so we're coming to the end of our time now, which is making me sad because I'm loving this convo. But I'm going to finish on, I think, let's get your final thoughts on this. Okay, because it's 2020 and all this stuff is happening. So during lockdown, one thing we talked about, Netflix, etc. I felt like the arts saved us during lockdown. Music, books, poetry, TV, films, Hamilton on Disney Plus. Everything was helping us get through it. And the government, obviously, they aren't offering support. We don't have Bill and Ted to create a song to unite humanity. So how can we, the people that love and appreciate it because we don't live a bland existence, save the arts? What can we do when the government aren't doing anything?
I think that there's a lot of people who are working on this in a very specific way and in different corners of the arts. There's a campaign that I've been done the most with and am most associated with is the Music Venues Trust Save Our Venues campaign. Yeah. That's not the only thing that needs attention, of course. There's loads of things, but that's the kind of the campaign that I've decided to get behind. And the MVT are fantastic in providing small things that everyone can do. At the moment, they're encouraging people to write to their MPs because that has more impact than signing petitions, for example. And they've got kind of templates and guides and all the rest of it on their website. But, you know, in terms of musicians, stuff like that, I mean, we've definitely lived in a culture whereby recorded music is effectively free for quite a long time. You know, go and buy a vinyl or a t-shirt of an artist that you like. It'll make a difference. You know, there are little ways of doing this. I mean, I do feel like the risk of sounding like a relentless optimist, there is kind of an opportunity for us all to remember that it's better to depend on ourselves than it is to depend on distant state structures anyway, in my opinion. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's better when we're a real community of people looking out for each other. That's a better model for living, in my opinion. But you know, it's a difficult time, and I'm filled with kind of fear and rage and all the rest of it when it comes to recent government announcements, and it's extremely insulting to be hobbled by regulation and then told that you're not a viable industry. It's just like,
it's all right, Frank, just go and get a new job. Just why not? Just retrain, Frank. It's that easy. Just retrain. Doesn't matter what you've done with your whole life. No, just retrain. Yeah.
Totally. And so it's a lot of these things are difficult, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you what the answer is in the next minute, because if I could, then this would be an easy situation. But I think that sort of listening to the people who are at the forefront of these movements and the suggestions they're putting forward is a good thing. And just sort of, you know, trying to be a player, lend a hand, get involved. If somebody puts out a call for action saying, hey, please do this, this will help, then be one of the people who does do that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Rather than one of the people who goes, yeah, that's probably a good idea, and then goes back to Netflix.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Takes 5 minutes to write to your MP.
Yeah.
Take 5 minutes, do it. Do you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing, I guess. But yeah, it's God knows what's going to happen, and if nothing else, 2020 has taught me to stop making predictions.
Right.
Because what the fuck?
That's what I think I say every day.
Yeah, right. I mean, I used to sort of, be a bit of politics junkie and sort of confidently say, well, this is going to happen. And it's like, I've knocked that out of myself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or 2020's knocked it out of me. So
Yeah.
I've no idea what's going to happen.
Honestly, yeah. I think the last successful predictions I had, which were the most bleak, was that I knew Donald Trump was going to win and I knew Brexit would go through. That's it. I knew those things for certain. But that's the last time I made any predictions. So I was like, I don't want to make any more. It's just not right.
No, yeah. Stop making predictions. Yeah, right. No, it's yeah. Who knows? I mean, we're all flailing and doing our best.
Well, I do sincerely hope that we can find a way to save the arts, because the arts saved us, and I stand behind that. That's what got us through lockdown. We would all be in a way worse place. We weren't able to listen to all this amazing music and watch back gigs and everything else. So thank you so much for giving us the information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been really fun. I've really enjoyed it.
It's been awesome. It's been great to see you. Thank you.
Wicked. Yeah, you too. Definitely.
Thank you for listening to Speak On. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share with your friends, family, co-workers, strangers in the street. To find out more about us, including our upcoming events, head over to Instagram, instagram.com/speakon_. Bye!